Hello, dear hackathon researchers. Welcome to the Intro to Research 101 and Design Thinking workshop. My name is Trisha, and I am currently a third year student at the Canadian University, Dubai, studying public health. And I'm joined by my wonderful co host, Sachi Swami. She is a public health student at the Canadian University as well. As we begin this workshop, let us know which country you're joining us from and what do you like about research in the chat box. The workshop format is as follows. In the first section of the workshop, we'll be looking at the steps in a research process and what exactly is the structure of a research paper. In the final section of this workshop, I will be taking you through design thinking, which is a very interesting concept, trust me. Now, research. We all have heard about research, but what is research in one line? It is the systematic search for new knowledge. In the following slides, I will be taking you through the steps in a research process and also explain a bit about them in detail. So here on your screens is a flowchart of the research process. We begin by developing a research question. A research question is a guiding point for your research project. It usually depends upon the length of your project, the type of research you will be conducting, etc. The next step is literature review, which literally means to review the existing literature. In this step, we dig up background information on our topic. It is an overview of the information that is existing in the field, and it actually helps you understand the history, scope, and the depth of your topic that you are going to research on. The third step is the research design. You create a research design or a proposal or an outline. This depends on your requirement. Allow me to explain the difference between these three because they are a little overlapping, I believe. So research design basically is a plan of how you will be answering your research question. It involves making decisions about what type of research methods you will employ, the scope of your topic, and much more. Similarly, the proposal is used to convince other people, such as your supervisors or let's say the funding committee, that your research is worthy of being conducted. And finally, the research outline. It is a rough draft about your research topic and how exactly will you be conducting your research. It is, in simple words, it is used to organize your thoughts. After you have crafted your research design, the proposal or an outline, we move on to data collection and analysis, which simply is the process of collecting data and analyzing it into meaningful information. And the final step is to write the research paper, review it, and finally publish the research paper. Okay, so here we have a couple of examples of research questions. Now, could you just give me a thumbs up emoji if you feel that the questions on your left side of the screen sound better than those on your right side? Okay, great. I can see a couple of thumbs up emojis. Thank you for the participation. Well, let's look at how the questions on your left sound more specific and proper than the ones on your right. For example, the first question here, what effect does social media have on your mind? Now, in this question here, we just know that it's social media on a broader level, but what kind of social media platform are you referring to? And what aspect of your mind do you want to look at? The question on your left says, what effect does daily use of Twitter, your social media platform, Twitter, have on the attention span of 12 to 16-year-olds. This research question here has pretty much answered everything. It checks the aspects of a good research question. Which brings me to this slide, where we can see the aspects of a good research question, right? Your question should be clearly defined. A good research question is not simply answered with a yes or no. Neither should it be overly complex, that it is confusing to you, even the researcher. Your question should be focused enough that you have adequate time and the resources to answer and complete your research project. The second part in our research process is the literature review. What is a literature review? It is a critical analysis of the information and the existing literature written by the experts and the scholars in your field and pertaining to your topic. The literature review is extremely important in a research paper. A few reasons why is because it helps you identify the gaps in the existing literature, which is a really strong point. Besides, you can establish context that you can use to back up your arguments while you're drafting your research. It is also used to provide evidence and support your findings. So, all in all, a literature review, a well-structured literature review that is, a good foundation for your research paper. Moving on to how is this literature review conducted? There are a couple of steps to conduct a proper and a systematic literature review. We begin by choosing a topic. Now, you want to make sure that your topic here is broad enough to have about, let's say, 10 to 15 sources in your literature review. It should not be too narrow or very ultra specific that you just have, let's say, 3 to 4 sources and it is never heard of before. So keep that in mind. After you've chosen a topic, we move on to finding the sources. Sources are categorized into a primary source and a secondary source, as you can see here. The primary sources include newspapers, artifacts, print media, text, etc. They provide direct evidence in the field or the topic that you're researching. Whereas the secondary sources include research articles that you find in your journals, textbooks, or even the information that you see on the web pages of, let's say, institutional organizations and the government organizations. It is also important to remember that the academic databases like Google Scholar, PubMed, and institutional websites, reputable organizations like the WHO, UN, they also have great information to refer to for your sources. One tip is to avoid using Wikipedia. Do your research a favor and avoid Wikipedia because it is very general and it is not really appreciated in the world of research. After you've chosen your topic, done your resource gathering, you move on to organizing your findings. These findings can be organized in a chronological manner according to the publication or the writing. You can also organize it based on the themes to identify the patterns based on the grouping of the subjects. Or organizing the findings using methodology is also a really good idea, in my opinion. So in this manner, you get to spot the underused or the unused methodologies across all the sources. After you've organized your findings, you start writing your literature review. The goal here is to not just sum everything up from each and every source that you've taken. Remember to highlight the important points in each source. And at the end of your literature review, it is highly important to make suggestions for the future research. This shows that you are very well versed in your field and you have actually gained a good knowledge, a 360-degree knowledge of the existing literature that you have related to your topic. And don't forget to cite your sources. The literature review has a huge list of sources that you will be using and referring to, and it is extremely important to cite all those ethically and in the proper citation formats. We'll be discussing about the citation formats in our coming slides. Now, after your literature review, you have the step of writing your research design, proposal, or the outline depending on your requirements. Once you've done that, we move on to data collection. Data collection. There are various types of data. We know that. But the data is mainly categorized into qualitative data and quantitative data. You can also use a mix of qualitative and quantitative data, and that is simply called mixed data. Let's look at the differences between the qualitative and the quantitative data. In your qualitative data, you have non-numerical data like your text, audio, images, etc. Whereas the quantitative data deals with numbers, figures, and mathematical equations, functions. Here we have an example of a qualitative research question. It reads, how do children and adults interpret healthy eating in the UK? The reason why this research question is qualitative is because it is just discussing the normal part, which is not exactly talking about numbers or any mathematical aspect. You could find the answer or your data to this research question by collecting information using observations, or interviews and focus groups are usually great source of data collection methods for qualitative data. So you can, for example, let's say interview a group of children and adults, or even form focus groups to gather data on the opinions of healthy eating in the UK. Coming over to the research question of a quantitative research. It says, how has the average temperature changed globally over the last century? It is pretty clear that here we see a quantity, which is temperature. And usually this kind of research question can be answered by collecting data of, let's say, temperature records and data from various weather stations across the world. So this list is inexhaustive. There are various data collection methods, but the ones listed here are the common ones. And you will be choosing the data collection type, which is the most suited for your research question and your needs.
Okay, so the next step is data analysis. So data analysis is basically where you examine the raw data that we've collected from the prior step, and we use this data to answer our research question, validate our hypothesis, and also draw conclusions. So the data analysis can be either qualitative or quantitative. If it's qualitative, then it focuses on interpretation, summarization, and characterization. And this is usually done through content analysis, thematic analysis, and textual analysis. So, for example, thematic analysis is basically where you categorize your data into themes to make it organized and easier to interpret. You have to make sure that your analysis directly correlates with your research question, and a qualitative analysis actually helps you to systematically summarize and categorize your whole data. And then quantitative is where you use statistical methods and mathematical functions. Let's say, for example, mean, median, and mode. And this is because we have raw data in the form of numbers because it is quantitative. And using these statistical methods or the mathematical functions, we bring meaning to the data. So they just do not seem like raw numbers because we have to establish a meaning. And next is descriptive statistical analysis. This is when you summarize your data into major key points. For example, you have findings of the daily temperature for 7 days. Instead of writing that very elaborately, you could basically just descriptively analyze it using statistics. For example, you could find the average and then just state that the average temperature for the week was, say, 37 degrees Celsius. So that is how you descriptively analyze using statistics. And a lot of researchers actually use various applications. Some of them are Excel, R, or SPSS. They're used for quantitative data analysis because they make the work presentable and highly increase the accuracy, and also it's easier to analyze data because it's quantitative data using these applications.
All right, so now we are going to jump into our first Q&A break. I invite you to enter your questions in the chat box, and Sachi and I will try our best to answer all your questions to our best knowledge. Sachi, if you could please moderate the chat and we could get started with the questions.
Yeah, sure. So the first question from Maisha is, for research, what kind of reference do they use? So I'll take this. Maisha, we basically use APA, which is the most accepted referencing citation used in academics. Apart from that, MLA citation is also widely accepted. In my university, we really use APA, and that is the latest edition, which is the 7th edition.
And we'll be covering more about the citation and referencing in our coming slides, so stay tuned, Maisha. Thank you.
Another question I see is, how long does the paper have to be page-wise?
All right, so well, it really depends on what journal you're submitting your manuscript to. And every journal has their own submission guidelines. So you would want to check that out before you submit your paper. Usually research papers also, the length of the research papers also depend on what type of research you're conducting. For example, if you're just doing a scientific research paper, that might maybe go over 10 pages. Again, it depends on the length of your research topic. If you are, let's say, doing a literature review, a standalone literature review, that would take you under 10 pages. So it actually depends on what type of research question and the topic you're looking at and what type of research you are conducting. I hope that answers your question.
I see another question asking, how long does each research paper section be? So for that, I'll be covering that in the next section, and we'll be talking more about that in the following slides.
Okay. Any more questions, Sachi?
Yeah, I see a few more. So
Right, go ahead.
Kimberly, I think for this hackathon, the teams are supposed to submit a presentation, a slides deck, and I believe submitting a paper is optional.
Right.
And Vedika, the specific number of citations, usually a research should include about seven to 10 citations, but for this specific hackathon, I'm not sure.
Well, I think that would depend on the depth of your research project for this hackathon. But I guess about 5 references is an optimal number if you're speaking about this hackathon. We have 2 more minutes, Sachi, to address the questions. Let me know
Right.
if you see.
I see a
Otherwise,
question. Where do we submit the research paper? Kimberly, I think we this research paper and which is optional, but the presentation is supposed to be submitted on Discord, if I'm not wrong.
right. So, is
Okay,
there any
perfect.
yeah, Sachi. So let me know if there's any workshop related question that we can take on. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next slide.
Um, I think we can move on because we have addressed almost all questions, I believe.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. And let's speak about the research paper structure. Over to you, Sachi.
Right. So this is the second part of the workshop where I'll be discussing how a research paper is supposed to be structured. I understand that submission of a research paper for this workshop is optional, but the content that I'll be discussing is actually very helpful for you in the future as well as in the academics. So for those who are planning on submitting a research paper, you can just you know you would actually find this very helpful. So a research paper has 7 major sections, starting off with the abstract, then the introduction, methods, results, discussion, conclusion, and lastly the references. So while some journals, or due to differences in academics, a few of sections, for example, discussions and the conclusions, might be clubbed. But according to the widely accepted format, this is how the 7 sections are divided. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
Okay, so abstract. It is basically the face of the whole research paper. It provides a gist or a summary of the whole study, and it is recommended that you do not include more than 250 words, because abstract is supposed to be a gist or like a quick summary, but it should be having major parts in it. For example, you have to make sure to indicate your research question or what the goal of the study was. Do not forget to write your methodology. How did you carry out this study? You have to include the results in brief, write about the implications, and ultimately you have to state the understanding of the problem. Uh, how does this study that you're conducting contribute to the big picture? What difference does it make? And a quick advice, and this is something that has personally worked for both me and Trisha, is that write your abstract at the last. By that I mean is after drafting a full paper, after completing all the other sections, is when you come to write the abstract, even though that's the first section. This really helps you because you have already drafted a full paper, so you would know exactly what to include in your abstract so that you do not cross the word limit and you stick to the points. You have to try to keep your abstract really concise and to the point and avoid including any citations. Next is an introduction, which is one of the important sections of your paper. So you would want to begin with a broader context and then narrow it down, just like a funnel. So about your topic, what is the big picture? What is it about? And then you would want to go into depth to discuss what is known about that and then what is unknown. And usually it is recommended you use a hook. A hook is basically it's a statement. It could be a question, it could be an anecdote, it could also be a quote. So it's basically a statement that you have to use, or it's recommended to use in your introduction to grab attention of the readers. You have to keep the readers engaged in your paper for them to read until the end. So that is why it's recommended to use a hook to grab the attention. And you would want to focus on answering questions. What topic are you researching? What do we know so far about it? And so what? What difference does it make for you to conduct the study? In the introduction, you would usually want to divide it into 3 paragraphs. In the second paragraph, you would want to do a quick background, information based on the literature research. And another important thing is to mention your objective, or what was the aim of the study, and end your introduction with a strong thesis statement. A thesis statement is basically a strong statement that is the essence of your perspective. It gives you a stand for your argument throughout the study. Right. Moving on to the method section. So the methodology is where you describe how did you carry out your study or your research. What type of data did you use, primary, secondary, or experimental? Describe the participants if you're doing a survey, or if you're doing focus groups like Trisha discussed. What was the sample size? What was the design? And what materials did you use? Did you use questionnaire, a focus group, surveys, whatsoever? If you're doing a lab report, then you have to mention what materials did you use. And then moving on, describe your data collection process. And it is recommended to include any inclusion or exclusion criteria. What aspects or what characteristics did you want to include in your study, and which ones did you leave behind? And a really major, I would say, a tip for writing methodology is that it should be detailed enough. Mention all the details you included in conducting this study for uh, for another researcher to replicate the research. And it is recommended you write the methodology in past tense. Okay, next is the results section. This is a section where you put down what were your findings. You have to state your findings from the study or the research that you conducted. The bigger picture here is how did you analyze your data? But you have to make sure that the results section is objective and you're just mentioning your findings. Also, do not forget that the data should correspond to the main research question. Refrain from really discussing or explaining your results in detail. And you could actually use figures like charts or a table or any diagram, and they should be really well captioned. So they show how your figures or your like tables or stuff relate to your study and your findings. According to the different rules of the manuscripts, they might be asked to placed at the end of the manuscript or in the results section itself. And discussions is yet another major part of the research paper. Here, you have to critically analyze, interpret, and evaluate your results. You have to make sure you throw enough focus on your key results, as well as bring light to your unexpected results. It is not necessary every time you would like get results that you were already having in your mind, and explain the consequences or what do the results mean, because the stating part is done in the results section, but you have to make sure you explain the meaning and the consequences of your results in discussions. And you could also mention if your hypothesis was supported. I would say supported instead of proved, again, because you have to back your hypothesis with why do you think it was supported or why was it successful. And lastly, you could mention any limitations of the study. Section, we only state our findings, but in discussions, you're supposed to write about what do they mean, what what difference does it make, what were the practical and the theoretical implications of the results, as well as mention any limitations that you might have faced during the study. For example, errors like human errors or technical errors. And last but not the least, you have to talk about the directions for future study. You can like suggest what else can be researched in this field of your topic that you've chosen, or else what else can be studied furthermore to make discovery better. And the last section is conclusion. The conclusion is a final pitch. It talks about the key points that your study has. You should make sure to restate the hook of your paper, which is basically the research question and the hypothesis. Do not forget to call attention to the main findings. In the conclusion, you would want to include findings like the research, your research findings. What did you find, your key findings, as well as the implications of the study. In conclusion, you could also mention the main limitation and also the future direction for study. It is highly recommended to keep your conclusion as crisp and as attractive as possible, because ultimately it gives a whole summary and it is the ending of your research paper. So you should make sure that you are addressing it correctly and avoid introducing any new ideas, because the conclusion is only to summarize your paper and not introduce any new ideas. And you would also want to refrain from repeating any information and do not include any citations. Last but not the least is the references. References is a super important part in the research, be it your research paper or even any presentation you're giving, because you have to make sure to give credit to the author. Where have you taken your data from? What resources? Were they research papers? Were they any websites or anything? You have to make sure that you're citing them. So there's in-text citation, which is put in parenthesis, and it's basically where you write the last name of the author with the year of publication. So this is in the text. You put them in the text, and in the references section, which comes after the conclusion, you put the references, which is also called bibliography, and APA and MLA. So they are the widely used citation styles. There are several more like Vancouver, Chicago, etc. But APA 7th edition and MLA 9th edition are the latest styles of the respective ones. I'll quickly run through how you're supposed to write references. So in APA, you write the name of the author or authors if they're multiple, write the year of publication of the study, what is the name of your of their paper, the journal name, volume, page. Sometimes you could just write the journal name. And lastly, you have to include the DOI, which is basically, it's a unique number that is given to the certain paper, or else you can just insert the URL. So here is an example. The name of the author, there are two authors. If there are multiple authors in the, you have to mention all of them, and the name of the publication, year, the journal name, and the DOI. Similarly, in MLA, you start with the name of the author, the work title, journal name, publication date, and the page range. So depending upon the requirements, you can use either of the referencing style, but you have to make sure to give credit to the author. Trisha and I have put together a Research 101 glossary. We have put together basic concepts and terms that are a part of research. For example, various research styles, what kind of process or concepts are used, some typical words that you should know about research and etc. And we'll make sure to share this in the chat section by the end of the workshop. So here we have another question and answer break. And anybody who has questions can put them in the chat box and we'll answer them. We'll wait for 2 minutes. Anybody who has questions can put them in the chat box. Okay, so can the research paper be structured like an essay? The research paper should explicitly mention the sections like abstract, introduction, methods, results, discussion, etc. So it cannot just look like one whole piece of writing. It has to have different structure like we just discussed. So yeah. And textual analysis, Amira, it's basically like a broad term that is used in research. It's a broad term for various research methods, and it is used to like describe, interpret, and understand the text. So, as the word suggests, you analyze the text. By that, I mean um, it depends on your topic, obviously, because there has to be a certain way to analyze the text. So basically, you have to like, for example, a textual analysis could be like, suppose it's a brand and they want to analyze their customer reviews because there are like several customer reviews, right? So you want to analyze that. So textual analysis will basically take these texts, which is the raw data, right? And they will analyze that and put them in a certain manner to make sense. So that is basically how textual analysis works. Are there references in the document? What section should be in the presentation, same as the paper? Um, because it is a research presentation, um, I'm I'm not really sure because the sections that I just discussed are the is the traditional method of writing a research paper. So I think we can take this up with the mentors. If that's okay. Are the references in the same document as a research paper? Yes, the references is a whole section in the research paper, and it comes just after the conclusion. It is formally a part of the research paper. That's right. So, any more questions? Feel free to put them in the chat box. We have a few more seconds until we move on. Uh, Probably. Okay, do we need to follow a format for research paper, like MLA format and essays? Um, so if you're asking generally, the format for research papers, it actually depends on, it could be MLA or APA or even the other ones. It actually depends on the journal and also for institutions. For example, my institution asks us to follow APA. Similarly, others might prefer MLA. So it really depends. Yeah. All right. So we'll be moving on to the next segment of the workshop.
All right. So it's been wonderful looking at the research process and the structure of a research paper until now. And let's move on to tada, design thinking. Well, design thinking is a very interesting concept. I love design thinking, and it is a very versatile concept that you can apply in every field and to solve pretty much any problem. The reason I feel that design thinking is linked with research in such a beautiful and incredible way is that design thinking focuses on finding solutions, problem solving, just like research, which focuses on answering a question and solving the problem, right? In the coming slides, I'll be taking you through what is design thinking and how can you apply it in your hackathons. So let's go. Design thinking, my friends, is a creative process that involves studying your process, studying your problems deeply, and also testing those solutions, building prototypes, brainstorming creative ideas, and much more. As you can see, research suggests that DT, which is design thinking, improves the ideation process of many companies, and their work cultures have also been improved after adopting the design thinking process. Design thinking is a cyclic process, and you can go back and forth every step. There is no such hard and fast linear rule that you have to follow. It is an iterative journey, as you see here. These are the essential elements of design thinking. We start with empathize, define, move on to ideate, prototype, and finally test the solution. Well, just as an example, I'd like to run you guys over the design thinking adaptation in hackathons. A little background about me. I've been doing hackathons since high school, and I have found design thinking extremely helpful in my hackathon journey. It has really improved my thinking ability, problem solving skills, and team collaboration. Our results have elevated to a much great height. It really helps improve the outcomes of your solution. So, empathize is where you understand your target audience and their needs. Then you define your problem clearly and also identify what solutions you want to implement. That's the ideate part where you create various ideas, you brainstorm, it's in the full brainstorming mode. Later on, you land on prototyping, which is building a simpler version of your solution. In this case, it is called an MVP. And finally, you test your solution and receive feedbacks from your peers, judges, mentors, everybody, and improvise your solution. And the moment that we've been waiting for. How can I use design thinking in a research hackathon? Why should I know about design thinking? I personally enjoy design thinking, and this is a rough sketch of how I would do design thinking if I were a participant in this research hackathon. With empathize, understand the problem, identify the key issues in your chosen prompt, move on to identifying the stakeholders. Who are the people that are affected by your problem? And lastly, gather relevant data. Your data should be relevant and inform the project. Step number 2 is define your problem statement. What exactly is your problem? Who are the people affected by your problem? Where is the problem? And why do you think this matters? After you've done that, you need to develop and formulate a focused research question. And finally, make your project goals in a SMART manner. SMART meaning specific, measurable, achievable, reliable, and time-bound goals. This is important. And of course, before you can start design thinking, it is important to understand the context, which we all know. We are in a 48-hour hackathon where we work in teams to solve real-life STEM problems. And we have our outcomes, which is, you all know, is your presentation and an optional research paper. After you define, you move on to ideate. Here, I would brainstorm ideas, create solutions. It is a full-on brainstorming stage. And then you move on to evaluating your ideas and choosing the
Alchemist.
one.
The
Can we
bro,
please,
it's not the Jeep.
Amira, can you please mute your audio so that we can continue? All right. Okay. So thank you. Ideate is where you brainstorm a lot of ideas, and it is basically where your brain is in a full-on brainstorming mode. And this is very important since it's a creative process. And after that, you evaluate your solutions according to the time and the resources that are available. This is very important. And finally, you select your solution. Select the most promising solution. And finally, you have the prototype stage. Here you create an MVP, which in your case is a research presentation slide deck or a research manuscript, which is again optional. After you've done all that, we come to the test stage. In the test stage, you communicate your findings, which is you present it to the judges. And the feedback that you receive will help you improvise your ideas, solutions, projects, everything. It it's been a really wonderful couple of minutes taking you all through this presentation, and I really hope you have had some really great insights to and takeaways from this project. I really hope that. And let's stay connected on Discord, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We'll also be make sure to share these in the chat. And thank you all for attending. I really hope you're really excited for this event, and let's start the research hackathon. Let's get hacking. All the best. Good luck to each and every participant, and let's enjoy. Thank you. And also, on a last note, Sachi and I will be circulating a quick survey in the Discord chat. And it would be excellent if all of us could let us know how was this workshop and your views. Thank you so much, and good day. And we'll also be sharing the research glossary that we have created. The link would be in the chat soon, and the Discord as well.